The gardener's shadow. The spring rain tapped gently against the glass-domed conservatory of Blackwood Estate as Elena Mendoza carefully trimmed the prized orchids that had become her signature achievement. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, hands steady despite the delicate work. 2 years as head gardener had transformed the once-neglected grounds into a breathtaking display that made the historic estate a destination for botanical enthusiasts across the region. They're looking exceptional this season, came a voice from the doorway. Julian Blackwood leaned against the frame, his casual posture belying his position as heir to the Blackwood fortune. Unlike his father's formal stiffness, Julian carried himself with an approachable warmth that had made working at the estate bearable even under the elder Blackwood's exacting standards. Elena smiled without looking up. The pink lady slipper is finally thriving. Your father will be pleased. He's been asking about it for months. He mentioned it at breakfast again. Julian chuckled, moving closer to examine the rare orchid. I think he's more excited about these flowers than his upcoming exhibition. The exhibition was all anyone at Blackwood Estate had discussed for weeks. Showcase of Theodore Blackwood's renowned collection of antique timepieces, including several pieces that had belonged to European royalty. Elena had been working overtime to ensure the gardens would complement the prestigious event. The East Garden should be ready by Friday, Elena said, finally looking up. I've arranged for the night-blooming jasmine to be placed near the veranda. The scent will be perfect for evening viewing. Julian's eyes crinkled at the corners. Always thinking of everything. That's why father hasn't fired you yet. Despite your tendency to argue with his landscaping opinions, someone needs to tell him that roses can't bloom year-round through sheer force of will. Elena replied with a laugh. Their easy camaraderie had developed naturally over shared mornings in the garden, Julian often bringing coffee while Elena worked. As the son who had chosen environmental law over the family investment business, Julian appreciated Elena's dedication to preserving the estate's historic plant species. Later that afternoon, Elena was summoned to Theodore Blackwood's study, an unusual occurrence that immediately sent a ripple of unease through her. The mahogany-paneled room felt suffocating as she entered to find not only Theodore but also his personal assistant, Daphne, and security chief, Bennett. Miss Mendoza, Theodore began, his voice glacial. I've always valued loyalty above all else in my employees. Elena stood straighter, confusion giving way to alarm. Sir, my grandfather's pocket watch, the Patek Philippe with the engraved falconese missing from the display being prepared for the exhibition. Her breath caught. The watch was worth more than she would earn in a decade. The security logs show you were the only staff member in the East Wing yesterday evening when you claimed to be checking the humidity controls for the adjacent conservatory, Bennett added, his expression impassive. I was adjusting the systems for the exhibition, Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But I never entered the collection room. Theodore's expression hardened. The watch disappeared during that exact time frame. The case was opened with authorized access codes, which I don't have, Elena protested. The system logs show your gardening access card was used, Daphne interjected, sliding a paper across the desk. And there's this: a recently opened account at First Regional Bank with a substantial deposit made this morning. Elena stared at the bank statement in shock. This isn't mine. I've never even been to that bank. The door opened, and Julian entered, concern evident in his expression. Father, what's happening? Theodore gestured dismissively. We're handling a security matter, Julian. Elena is being accused of theft, Julian stated, quickly assessing the situation. The evidence is quite compelling, his father replied coldly. Elena turned to Julian, desperation in her eyes. I didn't take anything. You know I wouldn't. Julian hesitated, glancing between his father and Elena. The moment stretched painfully as Elena watched outcloud his features. Julian, she whispered. He looked away. Father rarely makes accusations without reason. The betrayal stung worse than the accusation. Elena straightened her shoulders, dignity reasserting itself through the pain. I understand. I'll clear my workspace immediately. Bennett will escort you to collect your personal items, Theodore stated. Consider yourself fortunate I'm not involving the police yet. As Elena was led from the room, she caught Julian's troubled gaze. The connection they'd built over shared dawns and botanical debates crumbled in the space of a heartbeat, replaced by a chasm of suspicion and unspoken accusations. Outside, rain had replaced the earlier sunshine, soaking Elena as she walked away from Blackwood Estate for what she believed would be the final time, carrying nothing but a small box of personal items and the crushing weight of betrayal. Broken reflections. 6 months passed like a slow-moving fog for Elena. After the humiliation at Blackwood Estate, she had retreated to her modest apartment on the outskirts of Willowbrook, spending days in a haze of rejection and anger. The gardening world was smaller than most people realized. Whispers traveled fast, and though Theodore Blackwood never pressed charges, the unspoken accusation hovered around her name like a persistent shadow. It was Hector Rivera, her former botany professor, who eventually pulled her from this stagnation with a phone call that changed everything. The community garden project needs someone with your expertise, Elena, he said, his voice carrying the gentle authority that had guided her through college. The grant finally came through. but we need a director who understands both horticulture and community engagement. Alina stared at the faded orchid on her windowsill, the only plant she'd taken from Blackwood. I'm not sure I'm the right person anymore, Professor. Nonsense, Hector replied firmly. Whatever happened at Blackwood is their loss. These neighborhood kids need someone who can teach them that growth comes after the harshest winters. The Willowbrook Community Garden occupied a formerly abandoned lot between aging apartment buildings. What had once been a dumping ground for old furniture and trash was now cleared, revealing potential that only someone with Elena's vision could fully appreciate. Despite her lingering hesitation, Alina found herself sketching plans late into the night train collection systems. Raised beds for wheelchair accessibility, a children's section with plants safe for curious fingers. By the third week, dirt under her fingernails and sweat on her brow, Alina felt something close to peace for the first time since leaving Blackwood. A group of neighborhood children followed her around like eager ducklings, absorbing her knowledge about seeds and soil with wide-eyed wonder. Miss Elena, look, called 8-year-old Zoe, proudly holding up a radish she'd pulled from her small garden plot. It grew exactly like you said it would. Elena knelt beside the girl, the simple joy in Zoe's expression washing away another layer of bitterness. That's a perfect radish. You've been taking excellent care of your plants. Can we plant more tomorrow? Zoe asked, already planning ahead. Absolutely, Elena promised, surprised by the genuine smile that came easily now. Across town at Blackwood Estate, Julian stood in his father's study, frowning at the documents before him. These expense reports don't align with the exhibition costs, he said, pointing to a column of numbers. Since Elena's departure, Julian had taken a more active role in estate management, partly from duty, but mostly from a gnawing sense that something wasn't right. Theodore waved dismissively. Bennett handles the security expenses separately for confidentiality reasons. Nothing to concern yourself with. Julian's unease deepened. The insurance claim for the watch lists its value at $300,000, but the collection catalog values it at half that. Appraisals fluctuate, his father replied tersely. Victor handled the updated valuations before the exhibition. Victor Hargrove, his father's business partner of 20 years, had been spending more time at the estate since the theft, often in hushed conversations with Theodore that ended abruptly when Julian approached. Later that evening, Julian wandered the gardens now maintained by a landscaping company that kept everything precisely trimmed but lacked Elena's intuitive touch. The orchids were dying despite the company's efforts, their delicate requirements, beyond standard care protocols. He found himself at the conservatory where he'd often joined Elena for early morning conversations. The space felt hollow now, technical maintenance having replaced passionate care. Julian realized he missed more than just the thriving plants. He missed the person whose eyes lit up when describing the Victorian language of flowers or debating the ethics of plant collection from endangered habitats. His phone buzzed with a text from his college friend Deacon, now a detective with the local police. Found something interesting about that bank account you asked about. Can we meet? They met at a quiet cafe downtown, Deacon sliding a folder across the table before ordering coffee. The account was opened with Elena Mendoza's ID, but the security footage from the bank that day shows someone else entirely, Deacon explained. The woman used a fake driver's license, good quality, but definitely not Elena. Julian examined the grainy photo. The woman wore large sunglasses and a scarf, but her build and bearing were familiar. Can you enhance this? Already did, Deacon replied, passing another photo. Look at the distinctive ring on her right hand. Julian froze. The ornate emerald ring belonged to someone he knew well, someone who had access to Blackwood Estate's security systems. Someone close to his father. There's more, Deacon continued. That watch never hit any of the usual channels for stolen goods. It's like it vanished completely, or was never stolen at all, Julian murmured, pieces falling into place. Walking back to his car, Julian's mind raced with implications. The accusation against Elena, the conveniently discovered bank account, his father's inflated insurance claim, all connected to Victor's increased presence and hushed conversations. Back at Blackwood Estate, Julian slipped into the security office while Bennett was conducting perimeter checks, using his override access, a privilege he'd never abused until now. He pulled the footage from the night of the alleged theft. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Elena had indeed been in the conservatory adjusting environmental controls, never once approaching the collection room. However, later footage showed Victor entering with Theodore, removing the watch, and then, most damning of all, Victor returning alone to place Elena's access card momentarily against the reader. Before using his own code to enter, Julian downloaded the footage onto a secure drive, hands shaking with anger not just at the deliberate framing of an innocent woman, but at his own failure to believe in someone who had never given him reason to doubt her. As he drove through town, Julian spotted a community garden sign and impulsively pulled over. Through the chain-link fence, he saw a familiar figure kneeling beside a young girl, guiding small hands as they planted seedlings. Elena looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes simpler, but she moved with the same careful precision he remembered. For a moment, Julian simply watched, struck by the contrast between the peace on her face now and the devastation when she'd left Blackwood. He gripped the fence, wanting to call out, but stopped by the weight of his complicity. What right did he have to disrupt the new life she'd built from the ruins of the one his family had destroyed? Alina looked up suddenly, as if sensing his presence. Their eyes met across the distance, hers widening in recognition before hardening into a guarded expression he'd never seen directed at him before. Julian raised his hand in an awkward halfwave, but Alina had already turned away, deliberately focusing on the child beside her. The message was clear. Whatever connection they once shared had been severed, not by distance or time, but by broken trust. As Julian returned to his car, the flash drive with evidence felt heavier in his pocket. He had the truth now, but he was beginning to understand that truth alone might not be enough to rebuild what had been so carelessly destroyed. The collector's truther, antique desk lamp cast long shadows across Theodore Blackwood's study as Julian methodically examined financial records stretching back 3 years. Outside, autumn winds scattered golden leaves across the estate grounds, but Julian barely noticed the changing season. Consumed by his investigation. Since discovering the security footage, Julian had carefully traced a troubling pattern. Victor Hargrove's gambling problem, a vice Theodore had once mentioned dismissively years ago, had apparently spiraled into something far more serious. Bank statements revealed large transfers to offshore accounts, coinciding with the disappearance of several valuable items from the Blackwood collection over the past 18 months. Working late again, the voice from the doorway made Julian start. Victor Hargrove stood there, impeccably dressed as always, his silver hair perfectly styled, the emerald ring identical to the one in the bank footage glinted on his right hand. Julian closed the laptop casually, just catching up on some foundation paperwork. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your father mentioned you've been quite diligent lately, almost obsessive about the estate's finances. Someone needs to mind the details, Julian replied evenly. Victor strolled into the room, examining the bookshelves with exaggerated interest. Theodore always said you were too idealistic for business, all that concern about environmental law and social responsibility. He turned, his gaze sharpening. Yet here you are, suddenly interested in accounts and inventories. People change, Julian said, holding Victor's stare. Some things don't, Victor countered. Family loyalty, for instance. Your father and I have been partners for 20 years. We've weathered many challenges together. The threat lay barely beneath the surface. Theodore would choose his longtime partner over his son's suspicions. How is the gardener doing? Victor asked abruptly. I saw you at that community project. Touching really your concern for the help. Ice flooded Julian's veins. Victor had been watching him. Miss Mendoza seems talented with plants, Julian replied carefully. It's a shame to lose skilled staff. Victor's laugh was brittle. Staff can be replaced. Trust, however, that's precious. Would be terrible if your father thought you were undermining his trust by pursuing unauthorized investigations. After Victor left, Julian sat frozen, the implicit warning hanging in the air. He had underestimated the influence Victor held over his father and the lengths to which the man might go to protect his schemes. The next morning, Julian drove to the small accounting firm where Daphne, his father's former assistant, had found employment after being unexpectedly dismissed 3 months ago. Her replacement, Victor's niece, had been positioned as a cost-saving measure, but Julian now suspected other motives. Daphne seemed unsurprised to see him waiting in the parking lot. I wondered when you'd come asking questions, she said, sliding into the passenger seat of his car. Is this about Alina Mendoza? Julian blinked, partially. How did you know? Daphne's expression was grim. Because I found discrepancies in the insurance claims right before I was let go. That watch wasn't the first item to conveniently disappear after being overinsured. Victor's been stealing from my father, Julian stated. Not exactly, Daphne corrected. They're partners in this. Victor handles the false claims and launders the money through his casino contacts. Your father provides the items and the legitimacy. It worked perfectly until I noticed the pattern. Julian felt sick. And Alina, wrong place, wrong time, Daphne sighed. The humidity controls she was adjusting would have recorded when the watch was actually removed. They needed a scapegoat quickly, and she was convenient. I have security footage, Julian told her. Victor framed her deliberately. Daphne nodded slowly. That explains why they rushed to dismiss her without police involvement. A formal investigation would have revealed the timeline discrepancies. I need more evidence before confronting my father, Julian said. Something he can't dismiss or explain away. There's a safe in Victor's lake house, Daphne offered. I delivered documents there once when he was ill. It keeps detailed records, insurance policies, payment schedules, everything. Victor's too methodical not to document his contingencies. 2 days later, Julian used his family's spare key to enter Victor's lake house during a charity gala that would keep both Victor and Theodore occupied for hours. The safe, hidden behind a mediocre landscape painting, yielded exactly what Julian needed: comprehensive records of the insurance fraud scheme, including the original valuation of the Falcon watch at precisely half the claimed amount. Most damning was a detailed ledger tracking each stolen item, insurance payouts, and profit distributions between Theodore and Victor. Next to Elena's name was a simple notation: convenient liability. Julian photographed everything, replaced the documents exactly as he'd found them, and left without a trace. The evidence was irrefutable, but confronting his father directly seemed increasingly dangerous. Victor's veiled threats suggested he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate problems, whether through character assassination or worse. Julian needed allies. His first call was to Deacon, who agreed to unofficially review the evidence. "This is serious, Julian," Deacon warned. "Insurance fraud, falsifying police reports, conspiracy. Your father could face significant jail time." "I know," Julian said quietly. "But what they did to Elena... Deacon's voice softened. "Sometimes justice comes at a high personal cost. Are you prepared for that?" The question haunted Julian as he drove to the Willowbrook Community Garden. Evening was falling. Most volunteers already gone for the day. Elena worked alone in the greenhouse, carefully transplanting seedlings with the focused attention he remembered well. She stiffened when she noticed him standing in the doorway. "We're closed," she said flatly. "Elena," Julian began, "I need to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss." Her hands continued working, never breaking rhythm. "I have proof you were framed." The words tumbled out. "The watch, the bank account, it was Victor Hargrove. And my father knew." Elena's hands finally stilled. "Why should I care? It's been 6 months, Julian. 6 months of rebuilding my life after your family destroyed my reputation." "Because you deserve justice," Julian insisted, stepping forward. "And because I failed you, I should have believed you." "Yes, you should have," she agreed, finally looking at him directly. The hurt in her eyes was overlaid with a hardness that hadn't existed before. "But you chose your father's word over everything you knew about me." Julian placed a folder on the workbench. "This contains everything: the security footage, financial records, Victor's ledger. I'm taking it to the authorities next week, but I wanted you to see it first." Elena stared at the folder without touching it. "Why wait? If you have evidence of a crime, why not go immediately?" Julian hesitated. "I'm trying to convince my father to come forward voluntarily, to admit what they did and make restitution. To protect the Blackwood name," Elena concluded. "To give him a chance to do the right thing," Julian corrected. "But either way, the truth comes out next week. He faltered. "I wanted to apologize first, not for my father, but for myself. For doubting you when you needed my support most." Elena finally opened the folder, scanning the documents with a carefully neutral expression. When she reached the notation describing her as a convenient liability, her composure cracked momentarily. "They discussed this," she said softly. "They deliberately chose to ruin my career." "Yes," Julian admitted, "and I was too blind to question it until months later." Elena closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. "What do you want from me, Julian? Forgiveness? Absolution for your guilty conscience?" "No," he answered honestly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just thought you deserved to know the truth, and to decide for yourself what you want to do with it." Something in his voice must have reached her, because Elena's expression softened fractionally. "And what happens to you when this all comes out?" she asked. "You're exposing your father's crimes. There will be consequences for your family." Julian's smile was sad. "Some things matter more than the Blackwood name. Justice is one of them. I learned that from you." Actually, as he turned to leave, Elena called after him. "Julian," he paused, looking back. "Thank you," she said simply, "for finally choosing truth." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but in the gentle evening light of the greenhouse, surrounded by new growth, it felt like the first tender shoot of something that might, with care and time, flourish again. Seeds of redemption. The following week unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony reaching its crescendo. Julian presented the evidence to his father in the privacy of the study that once seemed like the center of the Blackwood universe. Now, it felt small and tarnished, like so many illusions exposed to harsh light. "You investigated me." Theodore's voice was dangerously quiet as he examined the documents spread before him. "Your own father." "I investigated the truth," Julian corrected, standing firm despite the tremor in his hands. "Elena Mendoza was innocent. You and Victor deliberately framed her to cover your insurance scheme." Theodore's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, perhaps recognition that his son was no longer the idealistic youth so easily dismissed. "Victor suggested a convenient solution to a temporary problem," Theodore said finally. "Business occasionally requires pragmatic decisions." "Destroying an innocent woman's career isn't pragmatic, it's criminal," Julian countered. "And I've given copies of everything to Detective Green. He's waiting for my call." For the first time in Julian's memory, his father looked genuinely alarmed. "You would turn your own family over to the police?" "I'm giving you a choice," Julian said. "Come forward voluntarily, make a full confession, return all the insurance money and compensate Elena for damages to her reputation and career, or I make the call, and everything becomes public record." Theodore's laugh was hollow. "You sound like a lawyer." "I am one," Julian reminded him, "and right now I'm offering you the best deal you're going to get." 3 days later, Theodore Blackwood and Victor Hargrove surrendered to authorities. The carefully crafted press statement cited accounting irregularities discovered during an internal audit, and emphasized the Blackwood family's cooperation with investigators. Julian arranged for his father's assets to be frozen pending restitution payments. The media circus that followed was exactly what Julian had expected. Photographers camped outside the estate gates, reporters ambushing family members, headlines screaming about the fall of the prestigious Blackwood name. Julian weathered it stoically, focusing instead on salvaging what remained of his family's legitimate enterprises. Through it all, he found himself drawn repeatedly to the Willowbrook community garden. He never entered, merely observed from a distance as Alina continued her work, transforming the once barren lot into a thriving green space where neighborhood children learned to nurture living things. It was on one such visit, nearly a month after his father's arrest, that Alina finally approached him. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, leaning against his car window. Julian smiled wryly. "Thank you. It's a new aesthetic I'm trying." Disgraced air chic. Alina didn't return his smile. "I saw the news. Your father took a plea deal. 5 years, reduced from 15, Julian confirmed, in exchange for testimony against Victor and some of their associates. The insurance companies will get their money back, eventually. And the estate, most of it will be sold to cover restitution," Julian explained. "I'm keeping the east wing and about 10 acres. Enough to start over." Alina nodded, studying him with an unreadable expression. Finally, she asked, "Why do you keep coming here, Julian? What are you looking for?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Maybe seeing something good grow from all this mess." Something in his honest vulnerability must have reached her, because Elena's expression softened. "Come inside," she offered. "The kids are planting sunflowers today. You look like you could use some dirt under your fingernails." It was a small opening, but Julian recognized it for the precious opportunity it was. That afternoon, kneeling in the soil alongside eager children, Julian felt something loosen in his chest, a constriction he hadn't even realized was there. Later, as they cleaned up the greenhouse, Alina broke their companionable silence. "I've been offered a position designing a new botanical education center at Hillcrest University." "That's wonderful," Julian said sincerely. "They're lucky to have you." "I'm considering it," Alina continued, "but I'd need to find someone to take over here." Her eyes met his. "Someone who understands what this place means to the community." Julian set down the trowel he'd been washing. "Are you asking me?" "I'm wondering if you might be interested," Alina clarified. "You need a fresh start. These kids need consistency, and you've always had a good eye for growing things." The offer stunned him. "After everything that happened, you'd trust me with this?" Elena's expression turned thoughtful. "Trust isn't something you earn once and keep forever. It's built daily, through actions that align with values." She gestured around the greenhouse. "This place taught me that again." 2 weeks later, Julian stood before the Blackwood Foundation board, one of the few family entities untouched by scandal, and presented his proposal. "The Blackwood Botanical Sanctuary," he explained, pointing to Elena's detailed renderings, "a public garden and educational space built on the remaining estate grounds, focused on sustainable cultivation practices and community access." "And who would oversee this project?" asked Marianne Wells, the foundation's skeptical chairperson. "Alina Mendoza would serve as head designer and botanical director," Julian answered steadily, ignoring the murmurs around the table. "Her expertise is unparalleled, and her recent work at Willowbrook Community Garden demonstrates her ability to create educational spaces that serve diverse populations." The same Alina Mendoza who was wrongfully accused," Julian interrupted firmly. "As the foundation is well aware, my father has publicly acknowledged that Ms. Mendoza was innocent of all allegations. Her reputation has been formally cleared." The vote passed by a narrow margin. When Julian called Alina with the news, her momentary silence spoke volumes. "You're surprised," Julian observed. "I didn't think your family's board would approve anything with my name attached," she admitted. "They're beginning to understand what I learned the hard way," Julian replied. "Some mistakes require more than apologies to fix. They require action." As autumn deepened into winter, Julian and Alina spent long evenings planning the sanctuary, their professional relationship gradually warming into something approaching friendship. The careful distance Alina maintained began to shrink as Julian consistently proved himself through actions rather than words, advocating for her vision with the board, deferring to her expertise despite his position as foundation director, ensuring she received full credit for her designs. On the first truly cold night of December, they worked late in what had once been Theodore's study, now transformed into a project office filled with plant catalogs and design sketches. "The water feature should be here," Alina said, marking the blueprints. "It creates a natural flow from the medicinal garden to the pollinator section." Julian nodded, watching her confident movements. "You've transformed this place already," he said quietly. "Not just the gardens, but everything." Alina looked up, surprised by his tone. "We've both been working on it." "I meant more than the sanctuary," Julian clarified. "When I was growing up here, everything was about appearances, prestige, the Blackwood legacy. Nothing real was ever allowed to grow." Alina set down her pencil. "And now, Now I'm learning what matters, Julian said simply. Truth, integrity, creating something that helps others instead of just impressing them. Elena studied him thoughtfully. You've changed. I had to, Julian replied. The person I was before couldn't face what my family did to you. The honesty between them felt fragile but precious, like a rare seedling finally breaking through difficult soil. Blossoming trust spring arrived at Blackwood Estate with unprecedented vigor, as though the land itself celebrated its transformation. The Blackwood Botanical Sanctuary's grand opening approached, bringing with it a flurry of activity that kept both Julian and Elena working from dawn until dusk. What had once been formal gardens, designed to impress, now flowed with thoughtful purpose native plant collections that supported local wildlife, accessible pathways winding through educational exhibits, community planting areas where visitors could literally get their hands dirty. Elena supervised the installation of the final cornerstone exhibitor, glass conservatory housing rare orchid species, including descendants of the very specimens she had once tended in this same location. Full circle, Julian observed, joining her as workers carefully positioned a massive phantom orchid display. Elena nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. With significant improvements to the foundation, their easy banter had become natural over the months of collaboration. What began as tentative professional interactions had evolved into genuine partnership, each recognizing and respecting the other's strengths. The sanctuary's opening day dawned clear and perfect. Hundreds of visitors streamed through the gates, many from the Willowbrook neighborhood where Elena's community garden continued to thrive under new leadership. Julian watched with quiet pride as Elena guided the first tour group, her knowledge and passion evident in every gesture. You've created something remarkable here, came a voice from beside him. Hector Rivera, Elena's former professor who had first connected her with the community garden, surveyed the sanctuary with appreciation. Elena created it, Julian corrected. I just provided the space. Hector shook his head. Don't diminish your role. Elena told me how you fought for this vision when others wanted something more. Traditionally, Blackwood. Julian smiled ruefully. The Blackwood name needed redefining, and you've done that, Hector affirmed. Though I admit, when Elena first told me she was working with you again, I had serious reservations. As you should have, Julian acknowledged. I failed her once. Spectacularly, yet here you both are, Hector mused. There's a lesson about resilience in that, not unlike those orchids Elena loves so much. The rare ones that can rebloom after trauma, given the right conditions. Later that evening, after the visitors had departed, Elena found Julian sitting alone on a bench near the water feature, its gentle sounds filling the twilight. Hiding from your own successful opening, she teased, joining him. Reflecting, he corrected. A year ago, everything was different. Elena nodded, understanding the weight of his words. For both of us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin to illuminate the garden paths. Finally, Julian turned to face her directly. I never properly thanked you, he said softly, for the sanctuary design. You've thanked me countless times, Elena replied. Not for that, Julian clarified. For giving me the chance to learn what integrity actually means. For showing me it's possible to rebuild after catastrophic mistakes. Elena's expression softened. I wasn't trying to teach you anything. I was just trying to create something beautiful from what remained. You succeeded, Julian said, his gaze holding hers, in more ways than you intended. The moment between them stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Elena smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached her eyes. We should celebrate, she decided, standing and offering her hand. I brought a thermos of tea to the orchid house. The night-blooming Sirius might open tonight. Julian took her hand, surprised by the warmth of her fingers intertwined with his. Lead the way. In the soft illumination of the conservatory, surrounded by plants they had both nurtured through seasons of change, they watched as the rare cactus slowly unfurled its magnificent white bloomer process that would last only a single night before the flower closed forever. Worth waiting for, Elena murmured, her shoulder brushing against Julian's as they leaned closer to observe the delicate petals. Some things are, Julian agreed, his voice low when Elena turned to meet his gaze. The last walls of caution between them seemed to dissolve. Julian reached up slowly, giving her every opportunity to move away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm still learning how to deserve your trust, he said honestly. Elena's hand covered his, keeping it against her cheek. And I'm learning that sometimes, trust requires courage, the courage to risk believing. Again, their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration of new territory between two people who had traveled a long and difficult path to reach this moment of possibility. As they pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I don't want to rush this, he whispered. Whatever grows between us deserves care and patience. Elena smiled, her eyes bright in the moonlight filtering through the glass ceiling. Fortunately, we both know something about nurturing valuable things through changing seasons. Outside the conservatory windows, the Blackwood Botanical Sanctuary stretched in all directions, living testament to transformation, second chances, and the powerful truth that with proper care, What appears broken beyond repair can sometimes flourish into something even more extraordinary than before. In the quiet privacy of the orchid house, with the night blooming Sirius as their witness, Elena and Julian sealed their new beginning with another kiss. This one filled with the certainty that the trust growing between them had finally taken root in fertile ground.